Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
And talk about another important relationship which we observe within the ecosystem, and that relationship is called as symbiosis. When we were talking about parasitic relationship, there were two organisms in which one was gaining and other was getting harmed. That organism was called as host, and the other organism which was gaining was called as the parasite. Symbiosis is the kind of relationship where both the involved organisms are benefited. Now over here you can see that this is the plants without fungi in their roots. Without fungi. On the other hand, over here if you look, this is the plant which has fungi in its root. Now, as you can see, the growth of the plant is quite different. The plant which has fungus in its root is growing nicely, whereas on the other hand, this plant is not, these plants are not growing as nicely, right? So this is something which we call as a symbiotic relationship. Few plants have fungus in their roots which help them in growth. So if we talk about plants and fungi, so what happens is, what does plant provide? Plant provides nutrient to the fungus, right? So what does it provide? It provides nutrient to the fungus, whereas the fungi provides water and nutrients for the growth of the plant, right? So in this way we see that both the plant as well as the fungi are benefited. Symbiotic relationships are not only seen in plants, it's also seen in animals. And this is a very useful relationship for both the organisms that are present in this particular relationship. Symbiosis can be because of shelter, because of food, because of the need of nutrients, right? So both the organisms will be benefited. Very important kind of symbiotic relationship that we need to know about is known as the lichens. Now, it's a very unique kind of relationship where an algae is involved with a fungus, right? And this union is called as the lichens. Now what happens is, the algae is a green plant, right? So it is green in color, and that's why you can understand, because of its presence of the green color, it is able to perform photosynthesis. So what does algae provide? Fungi is the food. So what does algae provide? It provides the food to the fungi, and fungi provides shelter, water and nutrients, right? So in this way both the organisms are benefited. We know that fungi is a non-green organism, that means it's not able to perform photosynthesis, and that's why this relationship is beneficial for both. And this relationship is known as the lichens. This is something what it looks like, right? This is lichens which is growing on the trees, right? So this is a symbiotic relationship, and these organisms are lichens, and whenever asked, always remember that these lichens are made up of an alga and a fungus, and alga is the one which is able to synthesize the food and provides this to fungus, and fungus is the one which provides shelter, water and nutrients to the algae. In this way we understand the relationships and the mode of nutrition in different organisms. We know that the plants utilize the nutrients from the soil. So it's obvious that if there is a certain amount of nutrient in the soil and the plants keep on utilizing it, what will happen? Eventually the nutrients will be will start getting over, it will start diminishing, right? So now the question is that how nutrients are replenished in the soil, right? So we need to know the ways in which the nutrients are replenished. Why? The reason is that these nutrients play a very important role in the growth of the plants. Also, while we were talking about the food that plants make, right, we always talk that there are certain minerals and nutrients which the plant take up from the soil and they need it for their growth. One such nutrient is nitrogen, right? So nitrogen is a nutrient which the plants need for their growth, right? Now, You must have observed in your gardens, in the gardens of your schools, and even you must have seen that the farmers actually spread fertilizers and manures in their field, in their farms. The reason for this is to provide nutrients to the plants, to provide the nutrition to the plants. Now we know that the plants absorb the nutrients from the soil, right? So nutrients that are present in the soil are absorbed by the plants, right? Now suppose there is a land, right? This is, let's say, a land where the plants are growing. Suppose this is a farmland where the plants are growing. Now what is happening, that in this farmland the plants are taking up the nutrients for their growth, right? So these are the roots, and along with the water, the plants are taking up the nutrients for their growth. Now what will happen? Suppose that you have a tiffin box which has, say, 10 chapatis. Each day you are eating one chapati, and what will happen eventually, that tiffin box will become empty. Similarly, in this case also what will happen, that if the nutrients are being absorbed by the plants on the regular basis, eventually the amount of nutrient will diminish, right? So nutrients will diminish in this particular land. That is why the farmers keep on adding the nutrients in the form of fertilizers and manures, so that these nutrients can be replenished. This is one of the methods which is artificial, rather it's a man-made method which is utilized by the farmers for the profit. When we think about the plants which we do not fertilize, or the plants which do not need fertilizers, how do they survive, right? So how do they obtain the nitrogen that they require for their growth? So what happens is that naturally the nitrogen is present in the atmosphere in the gas form. We've already seen that it is not possible for the plants to utilize this nitrogen gas like it utilizes the carbon dioxide. We've seen that in photosynthesis, the plants utilize carbon dioxide for the purpose of photosynthesis, but in the case of nitrogen gas, this is not possible. That is why this nitrogen gas needs to be fixed so that the plants can utilize it. Now, when we are talking about fertilizers, these fertilizers contain various nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Right? Apart from that, there are other fertilizers which contain different nutrients, but these nutrients are primarily used to keep healthy growth of plants. We need to keep on adding fertilizers and manures, and the farmers, they do it regularly so that they get a good yield, right? We know that more the crop production, more will be the economical profit that the farmers will be able to gain from it. That's why they keep on adding the fertilizers to keep the soil filled with nutrients, and also to provide nutrients for plant. Now, when we talk about the natural ways in which the plants actually, the nutrients are replenished in the soil, there are different ways in which it happens. First thing we need to understand is, when the plant is growing on a particular piece of land, right, like I already told you, the nitrogen is being utilized again and again, and it's not possible for the plant to utilize the nitrogen which is present as gas, right? So it needs a proper form of a nitrogen through which it can, so that the plant can absorb it, right? So there are different ways in which the nitrogen is fixed. Now, there is a kind of bacterium called as the rhizobium, right? So this is a bacterium which stays in the root nodules of legumes, right? So in the leguminous plants, these rhizobium bacteria are surviving. So if you see, these are the root nodules where you will find the rhizobium bacteria, right? And this bacteria, what it does, it fixes the nitrogen gas into soluble forms. That means that these soluble forms, what will happen, these soluble forms will be utilized by the plants. Now if you see, we can see that the rhizobium, which is present in the root nodules, provide this plant with the nitrogen, right? And what does the plant provide the rhizobium? Rhizobium, although it can fix nitrogen, it cannot make its own food. So what does plant provide it? It provides the rhizobium with food. So again, if you see the relationship, it's something like this. So rhizobium and plant, there is a relationship. What is it? That rhizobium provides nitrogen and plant provides food and shelter to this particular bacteria, right? So in this way we see that this bacteria is able to fix these the gaseous form of nitrogen into soluble forms, which is then utilized by the plants. So what are these legumes? These legumes are the plants like moong dal. These are beans, peas, right? Grams. These are the leguminous plants which contain root nodules having rhizobium. Now, if you look at these plants, if you look at the food material that I am talking about, you will remember that this food material is found to be rich in protein. And we already have seen that protein is what? Protein is a nitrogenous substance, right? So, it is quite obvious that the legumes have ample amount of nitrogen to produce protein, right? So in this way, these plant materials or these plant products have rich protein in them, right? So in this way, we see that how the rhizobium and the plant has a symbiotic relationship which benefits both the partners, right? So what do they have? And we have studied about this relationship in detail. And we know that symbiotic relationship is a relationship where both the partners are benefited, right? So over here, rhizobium is benefited as it gets food and shelter from the plant, and plants is benefited because it gets the nitrogen in soluble form, which it can utilize properly, right? So in this way, we see that how the soil is replenished with the nutrients, right? And that is the reason why we see that legumes are rich in protein, because they contain rhizobium, which provides them with ample amount of soluble nitrogen, right, students? So in this way, once we've understood that how naturally, right, how we can replenish the soil naturally with the nitrogen, this association becomes really important for the farmers, as the farmers can utilize this association and reduce the use of the chemical fertilizer. Now, the chemical fertilizers are fertilizers which will cause harm to the soil. It also causes water pollution, and that's why we always talk about reducing the use of such kind of fertilizers. This kind of relationship, this symbiotic relationship, is beneficial for the farmer, because with the help of this relationship, understanding this and utilizing it in the farms will help them in replenishing the soil naturally and without using, or with using less amount of fertilizer, right? This will be economical for them, and it will also be beneficial for the environment. Now, once we've understood that how the soil is replenished and why is it important to replenish the soil, I hope you will be able to understand that what role does rhizobium play and what role this symbiotic relationship has in maintaining a balance in the nature. In this way, students, we've completed the chapter, and in this chapter we've studied the ways in which the plants obtain their food, and we've seen that how the animals are completely dependent on the plants, and some animals are indirectly dependent on the plants. We've also seen the plants which we can call as these are not completely heterotrophs. These are semi-heterotrophs because these insectivorous plants actually go under photosynthesis, but for certain nutrients, right, they utilize insects. So in this way, we've studied about the different and interesting ways in which plants obtain their food. I hope you will be able to understand this and you enjoyed the chapter.